Get going here. We're just going to tape, and then my assistant Desta will edit what she has to edit. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's Grant Cameron, and I have a good friend of mine who I've known, we'll get into this, for a number of years. He's had one of the better stories I've ever heard in terms of trying to figure out what's going on here. I always say that if you want to know what's going on, you got to talk to the people who are talking with the intelligence. So I'm joined today by my good friend Ron Johnson from Utah. And good morning, Ron.
Good morning.
Beautiful. Wait, when was we used to go with Marley and that group from Salt Lake City to UFO Congress, right? That's when we first met, when we would be down there in Scottsdale.
Right. Correct.
And so I didn't, at that time, I just heard from Marley that you had a story, but I never asked you about it. And it was only years later that we came in contact, and I found out that you had this story. And just for people who may be tuning in now, because I want to sort of talk to you and update developments and what's happened in the last couple of years, because you're now putting together your book. So you're sort of going back over your story. But I wanted to sort of start with you telling people sort of a brief overview of how this starts for you, and maybe for 5 minutes, just talk about the background to your stories that we're going to get into here.
Okay. Well, it first started in California, but the main story that I want to get across actually starts right about the year 2000. And
okay.
The entity that I have been in contact with, his name is Elbie. And in 2007, I was involved in an industrial accident.
Okay.
And had back surgery. And after the accident and after the surgery, I was having a tough time moving.
Yeah.
Dressing myself and bending over because of my lower back injury. And so I started to meditate, and this entity started to contact me right after. And a couple years later, he didn't cure me 100%, but he did heal me enough to where I could, move real good. Okay. And bend over. Oh. And pretty much all my life, I've been having these experiences ever since I was from 3 years old up to my current age. And been trying to figure out what it was that I was actually, experiencing, because they're real vague in telling me, when I ask them what's going on, they're real vague in answering me.
Wow.
But
and the being that you're dealing with, Elbie, he's not an ordinary type of being. It's like he's not a gray or a reptilian. Maybe just describe who you're dealing with here.
Okay, he's more of a, how do you describe it? He's not human, but he's a human type. And when I say a human type, I mean he's got a head, 2 arms, 2 legs, yeah, and a body, but he doesn't look anything like us. He has triple ridges on top of his head, large black eyes, a very large cranium, and a very, very small chin, mouth, nose. Very anorexic looking, almost like a skin-wrapped skeleton. Wow. Is what it reminds me of. But whenever he would show up and appear to me, he just had a feeling of pure 100% love.
Wow.
Whereas the encounters I've had before were more negative.
Did they involve him, the more negative experiences?
Uh,
Or did he appear later?
now he popped in later. Like I say, right after about 2008 is when he first started taking me with him.
Oh, good.
But back in 1973, I had an encounter in northern Utah.
Okay.
And right after that encounter, I didn't see any entities in it, but I started having a recurring nightmare. And there was an entity in this recurring nightmare that I believe was Elbie.
Okay. Now, I'd asked you a couple of questions just recently about Elbie, whether you asked him whether he was an alien, whether he had clothes on, this kind of thing. That I've always found it kind of strange that there's almost like you start to wonder, the weird things that don't make sense about this being. So did you ever ask him whether he was an alien or where he was from?
I have. I've asked him 2 or 3 times in my different encounters I've had with him, but he's never answered.
Wow. And is he a tall being? Is he very big, or what size would he be?
He's approximately 5 foot tall.
Okay.
He comes up to about here, about to my chin on me.
Okay.
And I've always thought he was an ET.
Yeah.
But here in the last couple years, I've been kind of playing and researching with the idea that he might be an interdimensional being.
Yeah.
Or etheric, like what we were talking about.
Yeah.
Earlier.
Yeah. One of the things I've sort of looked at, and that's where I started to question what this really is what you see, and you've experienced this as well, is you don't just have like an ET who walks in your room and gives you a message or does whatever to you. You have these sort of spiritual experiences where they sort of link together. Sometimes people don't think they're linked, but you've had 36 out-of-body experiences and things like that seem to indicate there's something more than just an ET going on here.
Yes, there's been since 2008 when Elbie first started appearing to me. I started having experiences with out-of-body, and he actually took me to a different dimension and showed me the different dimensions.
Oh.
Or I should say the different astral planes. Okay. Between our reality and what you would call heaven.
So for somebody that's just listening in that doesn't understand, what's your understanding based upon what he told you about how this works?
Well, from what my understanding is, from what he has showed me and told me, this is hard to put in words.
Yeah, that's right. It is.
Oh boy. There's a spiritual aspect to this.
Okay.
And oh boy, this is difficult.
Yeah. But he did explain this to you, correct?
Yeah, he more showed it to me in experiences than actually explaining. A lot of the explaining he did to me was face to face, and there wasn't, and I can't remember a lot of what he told me, but he has told me many times that when the time was right, it would be a flood of information.
Okay. And it's all telepathic, correct?
Yes, it's all telepathic.
And you've actually been able to, we talked about the family situation. You've actually been able to get him to interact with your sister, correct? Can you go through that?
Yeah, correct. I asked him years ago when my sister was living in Seattle to if he would go and visit my sister.
Yeah.
And then I've also asked him at the same time if he could go visit Marley.
Oh, is that right?
Salt Lake. Yeah, but he's never gone to see her. But I remember my sister was telling me one night that there was an entity that was standing in her room when she woke up, and I believe it was him that went to visit her.
Now you mentioned there's a spiritual aspect, and you're a member of the LDS Church, and I wanted to ask, how does it influence what you've sort of been brought up with? Because I think the LDS Church is a little more receptive to this idea than maybe other churches. And you may not, I don't know if you know Joe Firmage, but Joe Firmage is also connected and had this very dramatic experience where he was sort of being guided and given stuff. So I just wanted to go through, you sort of had brought it up with people, or how's it affected your life based upon your experiences in terms of the spiritual aspect?
Well, in the it's actually helped me with my spirituality, even with the church and religion.
Yeah.
There's oh heck. There's been things happen to me. I've been having these dreams about the same time that Elbie started showing up.
Okay.
And these certain dreams I've had were very religious in nature.
Wow.
And I've asked Elbie about religion, and he told me that he knows who Jesus is, who we call Jesus.
Wow.
And he told me there was a source that we call God.
Yeah.
And a lot of people in the UFO field they discount religion.
Right.
And I think religion has a main aspect to what's going on here.
Yeah.
With this.
If
that makes any sense.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. That's where I say to people, it's going to be a lot less physical than you think. It's going to be a lot more spiritual than people think, and people aren't going to be very happy about it because people want technology, they want toys, they want all this kind of stuff. They're really not interested in, for example, you maybe talk a little bit more about this unconditional love, which a lot of people describe, where it's sort of hard to put into words that when you come to these beings, that people describe them as sort of evil, demonic entities or whatever, but you're describing this unconditional love that a lot of people talk about when they encounter these beings.
Yeah, it's just they emit this, and it just enters into your body, and it's just it's the same loving feeling that you get when when you have spiritual or religious experiences.
Okay. Now you've I encourage you. Now you'd already started. You're doing a book on this.
Yes.
On your stuff, and so give me the sort of the what's going to be in the book, where you are in the book. I've watched your postings, and you're talking about you're having some trouble with the computer, like they're sort of testing you, and you've had some health issues where you're trying to erase this along because you've had some health issues that may play a part in this whole thing.
Yeah, I believe it does. But anyway, my book is coming along pretty good. I'm about halfway through it.
Okay.
But I'm at that point now where I'm starting to edit a lot of it,
yeah,
and erase a lot of it and then rewrite it. And I tell you, this is tough.
yeah. And so what kind of experiences do you go through? Like, how do you set up the book in terms of, like, when you first encounter, you go through the religious messages, or how do you
Well,
set up the book? Like, how is it set up?
well, I'm trying to get it set up so it doesn't read like a Sears catalog. I want to incorporate all this spirituality and stuff into it, but I'm having a tough time getting it formatted.
Yeah.
But I'm starting at the age of 3.
Okay.
When my first actual experience started.
So describe the first one. Describe your, like, a 3-year-old experience. How does this start? Like, what is your first encounter?
Well, my first remembered encounter was I disappeared out of the house.
Okay.
We lived in Southern California.
Okay.
And I was 3 years old. I had a brother and sister and my mom and dad. We all lived in a little 1-room house.
Okay.
In Hermosa Beach. And I was sitting on the floor with my brother and sister. They were both older than I was. And I remember the phone rang, and I was gone.
Wow.
That's the way my sister and my brother described it to me.
Okay.
But what I remember is I got up when the phone rang. I went to the front door, and the front door had a glass in it.
Okay.
It went from the bottom to the top.
Okay.
And I was looking through the glass, and there was 3 what I thought was older children out there.
Okay.
Taller than me. And I don't know how I got through the locked door through that glass, but I found myself outside with them. And we were in this area that had eucalyptus trees and ivy. And the next thing I remember, I'm up in the air waving bye-bye to them. And that's where I'm starting.
Wow.
I apologize for the way I'm talking, but
No, I mean, you've got an incredible story, and anything you need in terms of help, in terms of putting the book together. I mean, I have some resources that I can help you, because
okay.
it is an extremely important story in terms of
Yeah.
going, because you documented everything, correct? You
I
logged everything.
documented pretty much everything
All
except
the
for
way through
the
your life.
early days.
Yeah, and that's extremely important, that you don't lose that story in terms of telling it to other people. What do you think people will get out of your book? What's the sort of the message that people should, if I was going to promote it, I think I know, but you tell me what you think people should.
I want people to know that they're not alone. They're not alone in this. There's other people besides me that have these experiences. And I just want them to know that they're not alone in it.
Yeah. You're getting help, or do you think that other people are, that there's some, whether it's entities or whatever it is, some intelligence that's sort of giving us direction and guiding us and trying to get us on the right track? Do you think that's going on?
I do, yeah. I think in my case, like I say, I've asked them many times what my purpose was here on Earth.
Oh yeah,
and they've never told me, other than I was They told me that my purpose here on Earth was to transport certain individuals, selected people, to another dimensional Earth.
Yeah.
And I don't know if if I should take that literally or in a symbolic way.
Yeah, you have had
No.
the experience though of you're one of the 50 people that I've talked to that have had the experience of sort of flying the ship in terms of, and then maybe go through the story, because it's a very interesting story you tell about when they sort of give you your wish. What do you want to see? Tell that story.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this was in, when was that, 2009, the latter part of 2009. First, I want to say how Elbie comes to me.
Okay.
How he arrives.
Okay.
The way it works is I get into bed, and as soon as I get into bed, this pillar of light would appear that would go from the floor to the ceiling.
Okay.
And it looked like a door opening, like to another dimension.
Okay.
And you could see things moving around back and forth. And when this would happen, then I would, boom, I would go, go to sleep.
Wow.
Right then and there. I'd pass out, and then I'd find myself face to face with Elbie.
Wow.
And then I'd feel G-force, and then I would be on the ship with him.
Wow.
Except for I was in a cubicle up on the ceiling.
Yeah.
And he, after a while, this cubicle would float down to the floor, and this brown entity, Elbie, would be there to meet me. I'd step out of the cubicle, and then Elbie told me that this is when I needed to know what was going on. And that's when he told me that I was selected from birth to fly this ship to transport people to another dimensional Earth.
Wow.
And put me back in the cubicle and said that I had to be in there,
Yeah.
or it might kill me.
Yeah.
If I wasn't in there. It would harm me.
Okay.
So I raised back up to the ceiling, and sometime later, I went back down, and Elbie was there again to meet me coming out of this cubicle. And then he says, asked me if I wanted to fly the ship. And so he took me over and had me sit in this chair in front of this console.
Yeah.
And the first thing I noticed was off to the right of me, there was another console that had a female entity sitting in it, but it was faced in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
And I asked Elbie, I said, well, what am I supposed to do? And he says, place your fingers and your arms there was grooves and holes in the armrests.
Okay.
Of the chair that I was sitting in. And so I put my arms in them and my fingers down in the holes, and they fit perfect.
Yeah.
And I asked him, I says, well, what am I supposed to do next? And he says, all you have to do, it's inside you. All you have to do is think of what you want to do, and the ship will respond.
Wow.
And just, where would you like to go? He says, and I says, well, I'd like to go out in deep space and see the Milky Way galaxy from a distance. And he told me that before we take off that you're going to feel some real heavy G-force. And as soon as we